So today I'm going to be doing a quick overview and a complete teardown of this new case from Thermaltake. This is the full tower CTE C750 AIR. I've got the snow edition with me today. Come along the journey with me. Let's tear this down, take a look at it, talk about what you can and can't do with it, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and get it unboxed and we'll take a look at it. Now, unfortunately, this case didn't fare very well during the shipping. The whole back panel is kind of all bent in. I'll have to get it apart and take a look at what other damage might be here, but I'll have to reach out to Thermaltake and get some replacement parts or a replacement case. So here you have it. Here's the CTE C750 AIR by Thermaltake. Now, this is a full tower case, so it's pretty big and imposing sitting on your desk. Claim to fame for this case obviously is the CTE form factor, which stands for centralized thermal efficiency. So one of the main ideas behind this case is that they've taken your motherboard from that traditional orientation and they've rotated it 90 degrees so that the outputs are sitting up here on the top. Now, it's just like the tower cases by Thermaltake, which I've been using the Tower 500 back here and the Tower 100, and both really good cases. I really like the way they've done that. I prefer that orientation just from an aesthetics point of view. But to build on that, this case here, they've really just enhanced the cooling capabilities of it, meaning you can put fans over here on the rear, fans in the front, fans on the bottom, fans on the top, or AIOs or DIY cooling radiators and things like that. So you really can get airflow. If you've looked at their website at all, you've seen the graphics that they've done. You bring cool air in from all three sides, exhausted out the top, and it should give you some really enhanced capabilities. But let's go ahead and tear it all apart and we'll talk about it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and just get your side panel off here. Now, to do that, there's a little lip here on the back, and all you simply need to do is just kind of put some force into it and pull it. It's easy to do. Now, it's not hinged or anything, but it will kind of hold itself there. It connects down here at the bottom with a little lip on the glass panel, and then you just basically lift that off and you're good to go. So once you get that panel off, obviously you've got a lot of working room in here to set up whatever build you want. Now, the motherboards that this supports is eATX, ATX, Micro ATX, and Mini ITX. Now, the maximum GPU length is 370 millimeters with a radiator in there, or 420 millimeters without a radiator. If you're gonna do air cooling with a CPU heatsink, the maximum height of that is gonna be 190 millimeters. Now, you do get a pump mount down here. It supports a number of different pumps from Thermaltake, obviously. That's what they're showing in their documentation, but it would support many other pumps besides that. There are just a couple of thumb screws to get that bracket undone. Now, they are thumb screws, but they are pretty tight from the factory. This bracket is actually really heavy duty. Now, you do get a couple of mounting locations to this that are, maybe about 3/4 of an inch apart. So not a lot of adjustment in it, but you do get a little bit of leeway. Now, the next thing we'll take a look at here in this case is the fan mounting bracket on the bottom here. Just a couple of thumb screws hold this in place. But once you undo those thumb screws, this bottom bracket just lifts up. And on the bottom bracket, you can get 320 millimeter fans or 340 millimeter fans, or you could choose to do up to a 360 or a 280 radiator. All right, so let's move around to the back of this case. Now, we've got our power supply mounting area. The maximum power supply length that you can have is 220 millimeters. We've got just a little entrance here for cables, because keep in mind your motherboard is going to be mounted up, and your cables are going to kind of have to snake around through here. And this is going to be one area where they could come out right here. Now, to access the cooling area on the rear of this case, very easy to do. Just grab up here at the top, and you're just going to kind of tug a little bit. This is just held in by 4 pins here on the panel, and they just mount into these little clips on the case. Comes off nice and easy. Now, this is a filtered panel, so the filter is magnetic and removable. So basically, you just want to grab it at the top, and you can just pull it off nice and easy. Now, this also does have a little lip here at the bottom in this panel that just kind of mounts up over the top of this. Put that in, and then you just have the 4 posts in there, kind of push it in. Now, this exposes the rear cooling area, and as you can see, we have a 140 millimeter fan pre-mounted. Now, these are the new CT 140 millimeter fans. They are pretty good looking, and it's kind of got a daisy chain system cable that comes along with those. I suspect a lot of people are going to replace those out. But to get this rear mount out of here, very easy to do. It's 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it comes right out. Once the screws are out, you just want to grab this, and you're going to have to fish all your cables out of there initially to get this out. But it just lifts out of there nice and easy. Now, I will say that this has two in the rear. It has two mounting positions. They're maybe about a ½ an inch apart, if even that. So you do just get a tiny amount of leeway left and right, depending on what your build is going to do. So once you get that out, this gives you access to mount all of your fans and radiators and AIOs or whatever you choose to do. So the supported devices on this cooling bracket are going to be 320 millimeter fans, 340 millimeter fans, or 220 millimeter fans. So radiator support on this bracket is up to a 360 or a 280 millimeter radiator. AIO support is up to a 420 millimeter radiator or up to a 360 millimeter radiator. So definitely lots of cooling options on this bracket. Now this bracket, we'll get to it in a minute, but it's exactly the same as the one on the front, and it's got the same specifications, so you can really add a lot of devices to this. Now that really is all there is in the rear here, so let's move around to the back. So unfortunately, as we saw during the unboxing, this back panel took a pretty good blow from somewhere. The box really wasn't damaged, so I have to suspect, this is maybe just a quality control issue initially out of the box for Thermaltake. Out of a lot of cases that I've ordered from Thermaltake and worked with, this is the only one I can recall in any recent memory as having been damaged. So I'm not going to hold this against Thermaltake. This is just one of those things. If you order enough product, every once in a while you're going to get something that's banged up. So the back panel is exactly the same as the front. It's just got a little lip on the back here. You just pop it off and it comes right off. Again, it's banged up pretty good. Now it's got a couple of filters that go back here. It's got a little small one that goes down in the corner. And this is going to be for your power supply, obviously. They don't fit on there because it is so bent. And it's got this filter over here if you choose to do fans on this this back panel here. Well, over here, which I'll show you in just a second. But if you choose to do cooling fans over there, there is a filter available to you. So we'll go ahead and set these aside. Now looking around the back here, it's a fairly spacious working area. Obviously where the power supply mounts, there's a couple of little rubber pads and a couple shelves that will sit on. And here is your cables to the front I/O panel. The front I/O panel obviously includes a power button, looks like 4 USB 3, a USB-C, microphone, headphone jack, and a reset switch, along with a hard drive light. But this is packaged up nicely in these cable management Velcro straps. It comes with a little clip here, and you can undo all of this. So looking in the back here, the only thing that's really removable is you do get an additional kind of a motherboard tray, and this is to add a couple of additional hard drives. So this has holes for mounting 2.5 or 3.5 inch hard drives, or might make a great mounting plate for RGB controllers, whatever you need to be on there. But the holes are there for hard drive mounts. You do get a number of rubber grommeted cable pass-throughs. Those are very nice. The rubber grommets are removable. And you do get a couple of additional cable management clips with Velcro straps over here. These are removable, just a single screw will remove them, and if you need to get behind them or get them out of your way for some reason. All right, so moving around the front, obviously we do have a front mesh airflow grill here. Now I will say they do offer this case in a number of different models. I think this is the only one that's available as the time I'm making this, but they do also make this in a 700 series and a 500 series, which I think the 500 series does away with the bottom fans, and the 700 series I think is a little bit smaller. I don't have the exact specifications right in front of me of those, but you can look at some information on their website. They do also offer these in an RGB version, which puts a glass panel right here. Now, when I was looking at which one to do, either the RGB or the airflow, obviously the airflow probably get a little bit better cooling out of it. But that glass panel didn't really cover this whole front. It was just kind of this narrow panel. Now, I personally, just looking at it from the pictures, I really didn't like the look of it very much. That glass panel just kind of seemed to be out of place. So, but to get this grill off, it's kind of like the one in the rear. It's just held on by a couple of posts, and you just clip that out. It comes out really easy. There is no filter attached right in here. The filter is clipped in here. Once you get that out and set that aside, the filter is just magnetically attached. Got a little clip here at the top. There are a couple of little clips on the side as well that fit into some holes here just to keep it oriented in there. And down at the bottom, a couple little mounting lugs. Putting it back in is nice and easy. I've had to run my hand over it here to get those to engage a little bit. But pull that out. It's a fairly flimsy filter, but good enough. It'll do the job. All right, so once you get that done, it exposes this mounting plate for the front cooling options, but on the front here, you can't just remove it. You do need to remove this plastic bezel in order to do it. And how that comes apart, it's fairly easy. Just internally here are some of these compression clips. They're just plastic. You just want to kind of press them together a little bit and just kind of work one corner out. There's probably a number of different ways to do this, but once that's out, you can kind of just work your way around. Just give it a small tug. It doesn't require a ton of force. So once you get that pulled off, it does expose the screws on the top and the bottom for the cooling options here. So we'll set that aside and then we can remove this. But before we do so, in the rear we talked about you get 2 mounting locations, and here you can adjust it to 3 different locations. There's not a lot of adjustment here, but based on whatever you're going to do over here on the side, you may want that just extra little bit of room. Sometimes you can be thankful for a couple of millimeters of adjustment. So anyways, go ahead and just pull that out. And again, it's got the same cooling support as the rear bracket does. Up to 340 millimeter fans, 320 millimeter fans. It supports up to a 420 millimeter AIO or up to a 360 millimeter AIO. Radiator support for custom cooling is up to a 360 millimeter radiator or a 280 millimeter radiator. It also does support 2 200 millimeter fans if you choose to use those. But once you get that out, set that aside for now. I'm going to go ahead and set this on its side. So moving up to the top, you do get another grill, and it comes out just like the other 2. Just give it a little firm tug. And it's got 4 pins that hold it in, and you can just set that aside. The air filter is just similar in its construction. It's got a clip in the rear here, and just kind of pull it out. A couple of clips on the side, and a couple of mounting lugs on the bottom. Again, kind of a flimsy construction, but suitable. It will work just fine. All right, so that exposes your top cooling area here. Now there's nothing really removable here other than the PCI bracket, which we'll get to in just a second. But there's no cooling rack here that you can get to. You just get access to all of your screws to mount in your radiators and fans here. Now support for the front cooling is going to be either a 240 millimeter radiator or a 140 millimeter radiator, a 140 millimeter AIO or a 240 millimeter AIO. So on top here it will support 240 millimeter fans or 220 millimeter fans. Now the top bezel does come off as well. I don't think it's required in order to reorient this, but it might be helpful to get it off. Now it comes off just like the front panel does. There's kind of a compression clip down here in the rear. You can kind of get that off and then just kind of work your way around. It actually comes off fairly easily. Just got to give it a slight tug. But once that's off, the front I/O panel is bolted separately to the case, so you don't need to worry about this damaging it. But you can take this off, you can clean it, you can get some access to the top here. We'll set that aside for now. Now the front panel I/O board does remove. It's 2 screws, 1 on each side. There's probably not a lot of reason to remove this in most cases unless you need to repair it, you want to customize it. I do like that it easily comes out though. So a couple of screws, and then you're just going to have to feed all your cables through, obviously. But there's your front panel I/O. If you want to do anything with it, we'll set it aside for now. So now in the top, you get your included accessories and you get your mounting bracket if you're going to change the orientation of your GPU. Now, this case, I didn't see a user manual included in the box or anywhere in here, so it makes me wonder what the status of this case was before I got it. But the included accessories, it comes with all the screws you need, some zip ties, a little speaker, and it comes with some extra clips and rubber grommets, for additional drive mounting should you need that. So to reorient this is very easy to do. There's 4 screws, 2 in the back and 2 right here. Let's go ahead and remove all of those. Now, once those 2 screws are out, this whole bracket just comes right out. Easy enough. The first time you do this, you may have to stop and think about which way your graphics card is going to go in there. You're just going to take it and then rotate it so that the screws are facing back towards the front. Before you do that, you should put the cable bracket on here, which is this included piece. You normally won't use this if you're not going to do this. But on the one side here are a number of different holes, so I suppose you can adjust this as needed. But once you're ready to go, you can just find the hole combination you want. Looks like there's probably 3 positions for it. So once that's done, just screw that back in. All right, so now that that bracket is attached, and basically you can orient your expansion cable in one of 2 ways, 90 degrees or 180 degrees, and it's got the holes to mount those in whatever orientation your cable bracket is. But once that's mounted, then we'll go ahead and, again, with the screws kind of facing back towards the front, we're just going to slide it in here. And in these long slots, just make sure your screw holes are right there, and we'll go ahead and mount it. And you do get a little bit of adjustment in that bracket there. Once you've got it to the right adjustment during your build, you just lock it down, and then you can mount your graphics card coming in the other way and face it forward. Pretty cool. I like that you have the ability to do that. You know, then your graphics card will be sitting like this in here as opposed to like that. So very nice that it'll do that. That's easy to do. You know, just take your time when you're first doing it, and make sure it fits before you start putting everything in there. Now, the only other piece that's really removable, you do have a filter down on the bottom here. I didn't talk about that. Again, I think this case is tweaked a little bit. This does not easily come out, and it really should. Most of them just kind of slide in and out, but I think this got bent maybe just ever so slightly. This one's got some framing on it, so it's a little stiffer than the others, but that works well enough. There's really nothing else removable. You could remove the feet if you chose to do so, but unless you're cleaning it really good, there's not a need to do that. Cleaning it or customizing it, whichever you might happen to be doing. Now, the other piece we want to talk about is this internal mounting tray. Now, this is for mounting drives on here. It's got a lot of room for a number of different hard drives. Altogether, the case supports up to 7 3.5-inch hard drives and 12 2.5-inch hard drives, through various brackets here and the ones in the rear. So if you're not going to use this, you can remove it and access the cooling options back here. It's basically just a single thumb screw at the top, let it fall out, and it's just got a couple of clips in the bottom, which you think would be easy to get it out, but there you go. And so once that's done, you can take that out, and it's got rubber grommets in the positions already, some of them. And then in the back here, it's got markings, for A and B for 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drives, so you can kind of help quickly orient you to whatever mounting options you want. But you can put your drives here, mount them up, you're good to go. So we'll set that aside, and this exposes this motherboard cooling rail back here. Now, there are rubber grommets here, obviously, for cable management to go through. If you're going to use an AIO, it's showing support for a 360 or a 420 millimeter AIO. So fan support will be identical to the other rails in that it supports 320 millimeter fans or 3 140 millimeter fans. So lots of options here on the motherboard side tray as well. Now, that's about as far as we can tear this case down. Now, one final thing I want to talk about is because your motherboard will be oriented 90 degrees to what is normal, there's a couple of ways that your cables can run out of there. It's got some holes coming into the back area. It's coming out to the side here, and you can then route them through the back. Now, when you've got your PCI bracket flipped into this direction, there's really nowhere to run cables up and out. You can bring them up over the top, but it's a fairly slim channel right through there that you could get some small cables out the rear here, because this back area has got a little place for cables to come out of. I think the basic idea is going to be to get them into the back cable management area and then come out through this back channel back here. You'll just kind of have to experiment around with it. There's a couple of different options for you to do that. Now, just like any case, you're going to have to probably get creative in how you're going to route everything around. But this case definitely has got plenty of options as far as cooling goes. Now, again, I'm not going to do a build in this one right now. This will be down for the road, so I don't have a review of what cooling is going to be like in it. But my personal opinion and experience with something like this has got so many options for you to do cooling in, and it's a very perforated case. There's really not going to be any concerns with cooling in here unless you're doing something crazy. So anyways, I think the idea of this is to make it look good and have lots of fun with it. And there's all sorts of options in here to do a lot of fun stuff. So All right, so that's about as far as the case comes apart. Now, the only real con I can see to this, aside from the back panel being dented in, is I've noticed that after I've run some screws in and out of here a couple of times, I've got some what looks to be like some little metal shavings floating around here. Now, I've seen that before on new cases, you know, just from the manufacturing process, but I've noticed that it seems like a little bit more in this case. And so what I would recommend, it's not really a deal killer, it probably happens with a lot of cases, but you know, just before you start installing your components, you know, mess around, put your screws in, what you're going to do, and then just, you know, give it a good cleaning and blow it out, you know, vacuum it up, whatever you need to do. So anyways, not a big deal. The back panel, again, that's just circumstance. That's just, you know, that's just that's the only time with Thermaltake it's ever happened to me. So I'm not worried about that. I would go ahead and order it. Now, from a functional standpoint, you know, this will just depend on what components and what kind of look you're going for. Definitely the draw to this case is the CTE part of it, the centralized thermal efficiency, getting fans on both sides and on the bottom and kind of sucking it all up. So I don't have any concerns from a cooling perspective. There isn't a whole lot of builds I would do that this would have any problems with. If you do the RGB version of it, that glass panel again was so kind of small. Normally that'll really restrict airflow. That's one place where, you know, I see a lot of cooling problems. You know, we're removing it will solve, but that glass panel just didn't cover that much of the front panel that I don't know if it would be that big of a deal. I just personally don't like the look of that particular case that much, you know, but you know, what I like and what you like is two completely different things. So anyways, building in this would be no problem. It's easy to do. It's easy to get to. That's one, to me, of one of the highlights of this case is it's fairly easy to deconstruct and install everything. Cable management's always a challenge unless you're using some of the newer fans, you know, the SWAFAN EX, Lee, the new Corsair stuff that's not out yet, but you know, the IQ Link fans, that'll be really cool. That'll really help with cable management on this case. So overall, I think it's a great case. If this is kind of what you're looking for and you need some good cooling options, yeah, it's a cool case. In the looks and styling department, I will say that I do prefer the Thermaltake tower cases over this, at least from an aesthetics point of view. Now that's really just personal preference. You might disagree with that, and yeah, I get that. So I just like the look of that better than this case. But what this case, if I had to sum this up, what this case reminds me of, having messed with it, played with it, looked at it, is if you remember the game Portal, you know, Aperture Science. That's what this case reminds me of, is a Portal case, you know, something that you would see sitting on a desk in a scientific office, things like that. It's kind of got that look and style to me. So from that perspective, it's pretty cool. In fact, I was kind of thinking as I'm messing around with this case, maybe what a Portal themed build would look like, because that's how it hits me. So anyways, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about this case, please let me know. What do you think about this case? And is this something that you would use, you know, in a big monster build or do some custom water cooling stuff? What concerns would you have about it? And I'd always like to know and like to read those comments and see what everybody's thinking about it. Again, check out Thermaltake's website. There's a couple of other models with this. I don't think they're out yet. I think this is the only one so far that's out. You know, the other ones might meet your needs a little bit better. But anyways, that is going to do it for today. Thanks for watching.